The chain that carried justice won. The beginning of a quiet revolution. The early mornings of Ctesiphon often carried a calm that felt almost deceptive, as if the city were holding its breath after years of distance, distrust, and silence between the people and their rulers. Khosrow I, known later as Anushiruwan the Just, had only recently taken the throne, and like all new rulers, he was watched with skepticism. Some wondered, would he be any different? Would justice finally take shape? Or would his reign become another long chapter of promises made and promises forgotten? One morning while walking in the palace courtyard, Khosrow paused. The sound of the bustling city outside the palace walls was faint, muted by thick stone and layers of protocol. He turned to his trusted vizier, Bosorgmir, and said, "People suffer silently, not because their pain is small, but because their voice cannot pass through all these walls. Between me and every injustice, there stand too many hands, some honest, some corrupt. If those hands fail, the truth never reaches me." Bosorgmir replied quietly, "Great systems tend to create great distances, Your Majesty. It is the nature of power." Khosrow shook his head. "Natural, perhaps. Acceptable? Never." His gaze shifted to a long golden chain resting on the ground, left there by workers repairing the part of the courtyard. Khosrow stepped closer, lifted it, and felt its weight. Something ignited in his mind. "If the people cannot come to the king," he murmured, "then the king must extend a path for their voices to reach him." And that idea became the seed of a small decision, one that would reshape an empire. Managerial Insight. Section 1. A leader's first step toward justice is recognizing the real distance between themselves and the truth. Most failures in leadership come not from lack of intelligence, but from a lack of genuine, unfiltered information. 2. The birth of the golden chain. Within days, the entire city heard a surprising decree. A long, golden chain would be installed from the outer wall of the royal palace, stretching all the way into the city's busiest market. Anyone with a grievance could approach it, shake the chain, and alert the palace guards. The city buzzed with speculation. "Another showpiece," some mocked. "A bold move," others whispered. "Or perhaps a trap," a few murmured, fearing consequences if they dared to complain. But the chain was installed. It glittered under the sun, visible from a distance, almost symbolic in its brilliance. For days it remained untouched. People walked around it, stared at it, whispered about it, but no one dared to reach out. They had been afraid too long. They had been unheard for too long. The chain waited. Managerial Insight. Section 2. Trust is not built when a system is announced. Trust begins only when the first person sees it work in real life. 3. The first complaint. Then one evening, just as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, the chain moved. At first, the palace guard thought it was a child playing, but as he rushed forward, he froze. It wasn't a person holding the chain, it was a wounded cow. The animal trembled, its sides heaving from exhaustion. A tight rope mark was still visible around its neck. People gathered around it, murmuring. One man said, "That cow's owner was killed by corrupt tax collectors in the nearby village. After the chaos, the cow escaped. It must have wandered here, looking for help." The guard's face changed. He didn't dismiss it. He didn't laugh. He ran straight to the palace. When Khosrow heard the report, he closed his eyes for a moment. "If even a beast is forced to seek justice at my door," he said quietly, "then the pain of my people is deeper than I imagined." He ordered an immediate investigation. Within days, the truth was uncovered. The tax officers in that region had been extorting villagers. When the cow's owner protested, they murdered him. Khosrow's decision was swift and severe. The corrupt officers were punished, the villagers were compensated, and the story spread through the empire like wildfire. A cow, a simple, nameless animal, had been heard by the king. If a cow could shake the chain and find justice, maybe the people could too. And from that moment on, the chain never stayed silent again. Managerial Insight. Section 3. People trust a system only after a visible early win. This is what modern management calls a quick win. It proves the system is real, without needing speeches or promises. 4. When the chain found its voice. Soon the chain began to move daily. A farmer came to complain about a landowner's abuse. A soldier reported mistreatment by his commander. A merchant described corrupt tax collectors case after case. The chain delivered. But Khosrow was determined not to treat complaints merely as isolated events. He often said, "Punish the guilty, yes, but always ask, why did the system allow this to happen? If we fix only the person and not the structure, the problem will return wearing a new name." He ordered audits. He revised processes. He replaced officials based on integrity, not loyalty. He strengthened the channels of accountability. The empire slowly changed, not from top to bottom and not overnight, but steadily, yet the greatest test was still ahead. Managerial Insight, Section 4. Effective leaders don't just remove bad actors. They repair the system that enabled the wrongdoing. Management equals accountability plus structural reform. 5. Justice reaches the inner circle. One night, a member of the court approached Khosrow with unease. "Your Majesty, one of the complaints is against a relative of yours. If we pursue it, it could cause tension within the royal family." Khosrow's expression hardened. "If justice does not apply to those closest to me, then justice is nothing more than a tool. The chain loses all meaning if it stops at the palace door." The investigation proceeded. The relative was found guilty, and Khosrow punished him exactly as he would any ordinary citizen. The message was unmistakable. Justice had no exemptions. The city erupted in disbelief and admiration. From that day forward, the chain didn't just represent justice, it represented courage. The courage to hold everyone accountable, no matter their proximity to power. Managerial Insight, Section 5. Integrity becomes real when a leader enforces justice even where it costs them personally. Organizational corruption begins exactly where the leader's private exceptions begin. 6. The hardest case of all years passed. The administration improved. People felt safer. The chain became a symbol known throughout the empire. Then one afternoon, the chain shook violently, so intensely that the guards thought a crowd was pulling it. When they arrived, they found a lone traveler, dust-covered, exhausted, but determined. He said, "My grievance is not against a local official. It is against the commander of the royal army himself." The guards stared. This was no ordinary accusation. If the commander was guilty, the army's stability could be threatened. If the complaint was ignored, justice would collapse. When Khosrow heard the case, he said, "If justice is to survive only when convenient, then it is not justice at all. Let the truth be found, whatever the cost." The investigation was long and complex, but in the end, the commander was proven guilty, abusing his power, harming civilians, and hiding it behind rank and loyalty. Khosrow removed him from command. The empire trembled at the boldness of the decision, but it also exhaled with relief. The people saw the truth. Nothing, absolutely nothing, stood above justice. A week later, the traveler returned to the palace. He bowed deeply and said, "That chain may be made of gold, but what it truly connects is priceless. It binds the fate of the people to the conscience of their king." Managerial Insight. Section 6. A system becomes trustworthy when people know the rules apply equally to everyone, no matter their power. This creates predictability, safety, and high performance. 7. The final years and the legacy years passed. Khosrow grew old. His advisors urged him to remove the chain. "Enemies have grown bold," they argued. "A complaint can be used as a weapon. You deserve peace in your final years." But Khosrow simply said, "If the chain falls silent because of fear, then justice fades with me. Let it remain as long as I breathe. Justice must never depend on a single man's strength." And so, the chain stayed, until the very last day of his life. When Khosrow died, crowds gathered in mourning. Amid them, an elderly man stepped forward, held the chain gently, and whispered, "The strength of this king was not in the sword he wielded, but in the chain he placed between himself and his people. We did not obey him out of fear. We trusted him out of truth. And with that, the chain that had once been just a length of golden metal became a symbol of leadership that outlived the man who created it. Final managerial insights 1. Leaders earn trust through direct, unfiltered communication channels, not through slogans, through access to. Justice must be visible, not hidden. People believe what they witness, not what they are told. 3. Systems outlive individuals. A just leader builds processes that continue without him. 4. Tough decisions define a leadership legacy. Choosing principle over comfort is what makes a leader unforgettable. 5. An organization that silences complaints creates a path to its own collapse. The Golden Chain was, in truth, a high-level feedback system. Simple, accessible, and effective.